Did you know that over 60% of Australian households are now living paycheck to paycheck in one of the richest countries on earth? Or that Australia's household debt is higher than the US, UK, and nearly every developed country? Something isn't adding up, and it's getting worse. From sky-high rent and record food prices to rising interest rates and a crumbling healthcare system, Australia's economy is under serious pressure. But what if we told you this isn't just a temporary slump? Some experts are warning of a full-scale economic meltdown, one that could hit harder than anything we've seen in decades. And here's the shocking part: most people don't even see it coming. In this video, we're uncovering the 10 biggest reasons why Australia's economy is spiraling and why it's happening faster than anyone predicted. If you care about your future, you'll want to stick around until the very... Number 10. Global shockwaves and isolation. Australia may be known as the lucky country, but luck doesn't last forever, especially in today's increasingly unstable global economy. In recent years, the world has been rocked by pandemics, wars, energy crises, and supply chain breakdowns, and Australia hasn't been immune to the ripple effects. In fact, because of its geographic isolation and heavy reliance on global trade, Australia is now feeling those shockwaves more than ever. A large portion of Australia's wealth comes from exports like coal, iron ore, and natural gas, which depend heavily on foreign demand, particularly from Asia. But with China's economy slowing, Europe in crisis, and the US teetering on recession, those overseas markets are becoming less reliable. When your biggest trading partners start to struggle, so do you. At the same time, Australia imports much of what it consumes, from technology and machinery to fuel and pharmaceuticals. Global shipping delays, energy shortages, and currency fluctuations are all feeding into rising domestic costs. In a world that's increasingly fragmented, Australia finds itself caught in the crossfire, too dependent on others, yet too far away to pivot quickly. And let's not forget competition. As emerging markets like India and Southeast Asia continue to rise, Australia risks being left behind, especially if it fails to innovate and diversify its economy. So ask yourself this: is Australia prepared for the next global crisis? And more importantly, are you? If this section hit close to home, drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Do you think Australia is adapting fast enough? And while you're here, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out our next video on how rising interest rates are shaking economies worldwide. Trust us, you won't want to miss. Number 9. Weak government policy response. One of the most frustrating parts of Australia's economic downturn isn't just what's happening, it's what's not being done about it. As the country faces soaring living costs, rising interest rates, and a housing affordability crisis, many Australians feel that their leaders are either asleep at the wheel or just reacting too late. Government policies have often been short-term band-aids instead of long-term solutions. When inflation started to bite, responses were slow and fragmented. When renters cried out for relief, policies focused on supply but ignored immediate affordability. And when the Reserve Bank raised interest rates at a historic pace, there was little support for struggling homeowners or small businesses caught in the crossfire. Take housing, for example. Experts have been warning for years about a brewing affordability crisis. Yet housing policy has remained tangled in bureaucracy, with blame bouncing between federal and state governments while property investors continue to receive generous tax breaks. Meanwhile, first-time buyers are pushed further out of the market, and renters are trapped in an increasingly brutal market. Then there's wage stagnation. Despite a tight labour market, real wages have barely moved, and reforms to address this imbalance have been slow, watered down, or stuck in political gridlock. At a time when Australians need bold leadership and innovative thinking, they're getting confusion, delay, and short-term politics. What makes this even more damaging is the growing public distrust in political institutions. People feel unheard, overworked, and left behind. And without confidence in the government's ability to fix the economy, consumer confidence drops, investment slows, and the spiral continues. When leadership is uncertain, so is the economy. And right now, many Australians are wondering, if this is the plan, what hope is there for recovery? Number 8. Brain drain, skilled worker shortages. Australia has long been seen as a land of opportunity, but that image is beginning to crack. In recent years, the country has faced a growing issue that few are talking about loudly enough: The brain drain. Talented, educated, and ambitious Australians are leaving the country in growing numbers, seeking better pay, lower living costs, and more career opportunities abroad, particularly in places like the UK, US, and parts of Asia. This slow but steady exodus of skilled professionals is creating a dangerous vacuum across key industries. Sectors like healthcare, education, engineering, and IT are all struggling to find qualified workers. Hospitals are understaffed, schools are stretched thin, infrastructure projects are delayed, and businesses are forced to either pay inflated salaries or leave roles unfilled. At the same time, Australia's immigration policies, once a reliable source of skilled labour, have faced delays, backlogs, and policy confusion, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. While borders have reopened, the damage has already been done. The pipeline of skilled migrants hasn't fully recovered, and many overseas workers are now choosing other destinations with faster processing and better incentives. This growing skills shortage isn't just a temporary inconvenience, it's becoming a long-term structural problem. Productivity slows when key positions are vacant, innovation stalls when talented people leave, and the economy suffers when businesses can't grow due to lack of manpower. What makes this even more alarming is the cost of living crisis back home. For young Australians, it often makes more sense to build a future overseas, where they can afford to buy a house, save money, and have a higher quality of life. If this trend continues, Australia risks losing the very people it needs to rebuild and sustain its economy in the years to come. Number 7. Climate disasters' economic impact. Australia is no stranger to extreme weather, but in recent years, the scale and frequency of climate-related disasters have become alarmingly severe, and the economic fallout is impossible to ignore. From catastrophic bushfires that scorched millions of hectares to record-breaking floods that wiped out entire communities, the country is grappling with the cost of climate change in real time. These disasters aren't just tragic, they're economically devastating. Homes are destroyed, farmland is ruined, supply chains are disrupted, and insurance payouts reach billions. In fact, some regions have now been hit so often that insurance companies are refusing to cover them, leaving families and businesses exposed to total financial ruin. In many areas, insurance premiums have skyrocketed to unaffordable levels if coverage is available at all. The agricultural sector has been hit particularly hard. Droughts, unpredictable rainfall, and extreme temperatures are crippling food production and driving up prices nationwide. Crops fail, livestock perish, and farmers are forced to either abandon their land or take on enormous debt just to stay afloat. But it's not just rural communities that are suffering. Urban infrastructure, from roads and rail to electricity and water systems, is increasingly vulnerable to extreme weather events. Rebuilding after each disaster costs taxpayers billions, and those costs are only expected to rise as the climate becomes more volatile. What's especially worrying is that Australia is still heavily dependent on fossil fuel exports, even as the world shifts towards renewable energy. This creates a dangerous paradox. The very industries driving economic growth are also contributing to the conditions that undermine long-term stability. The economic toll of climate disasters is no longer a future problem. It's a present-day crisis, and unless major changes are made, the financial strain on the nation. Number 6. Population growth versus infrastructure. Australia's population has been growing at a rapid pace, especially in major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Fueled by high migration levels and natural growth, the country has welcomed millions of new residents over the past 2 decades. But while population numbers have surged, the infrastructure needed to support that growth hasn't kept up, and now the cracks are starting to show. Public transport systems are overcrowded and outdated. Roads are jammed with traffic during every peak hour. Hospitals and schools are overburdened with long wait times and limited resources. In some growing suburbs, families are forced to wait years for new schools, clinics, or even basic roads to be built. The result is a growing sense of frustration and fatigue, particularly among younger Australians trying to raise families or build a stable life. Housing is another major pressure point. As more people compete for limited space in urban centres, property prices and rents have skyrocketed. Yet, urban planning hasn't kept pace. Zoning laws, slow approval processes, and a lack of investment in high-density infrastructure have created sprawling suburbs without adequate services, pushing people further away from city centres and their jobs. This imbalance between population growth and infrastructure development is also dragging down productivity. Long commutes mean less time for work, family, or rest. Congested roads and unreliable public transport hurt businesses and workers alike. And when essential services are stretched too thin, overall quality of life declines, even as the economy grows on paper. The core problem isn't growth itself, it's poor planning and underinvestment. Without urgent upgrades to infrastructure and smarter urban development, Australia risks becoming a nation where opportunity exists, but access to it is increasingly limited. And the longer the gap widens, the harder it will be to close. Number 5. Wages aren't keeping up. One of the most painful realities facing everyday Australians right now is this: your paycheck simply doesn't go as far as it used to. While prices for essentials like food, fuel, housing, and utilities have surged, wages have remained largely stagnant. In real terms, when adjusted for inflation, many workers are actually earning less than they were a few years ago. This growing gap between earnings and expenses is pushing more people toward financial stress, even those in full-time jobs. The cost of living has soared, but salary increases haven't followed. In fact, many businesses have frozen wages or offered only marginal raises that don't come close to covering rising bills. As a result, Australians are finding themselves working harder just to maintain the same standard of living, if not worse. What's even more troubling is that this issue affects a wide range of sectors. From teachers and nurses to hospitality workers and retail staff, the squeeze is being felt across the board. Younger workers in particular are struggling to gain financial footing, often working multiple casual or part-time jobs just to stay afloat. Gig economy jobs have also surged in popularity, but many of them come with low pay, no job security, and few benefits, making it harder for workers to save or plan for the future. Meanwhile, corporate profits and executive bonuses continue to rise, creating a widening divide between top earners and the average Australian. Without real wage growth, consumer spending slows down. Families cut back, businesses feel the pinch, and economic momentum weakens. It becomes a vicious cycle. People can't spend because they're not earning enough, and the economy suffers because people aren't spending. For a nation built on the promise of opportunity and prosperity, this growing wage gap is a warning sign that cannot be ignored. Number 4. Crippling household debt. Australia is facing a quiet but powerful economic threat, one that lives inside millions of homes. It's called household debt, and right now, Australia has one of the highest household debt-to-income ratios in the world. On average, Australians owe nearly $2 for every dollar they earn, and a huge chunk of that debt is tied up in mortgages. For years, record low interest rates made it easy to borrow. People took on large home loans, believing property values would keep rising and repayments would stay manageable. But now, with interest rates climbing rapidly, those same debts have become a crushing weight. Monthly mortgage payments have increased by hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars, leaving families scrambling just to keep up. And it's not just homeowners. Credit card debt, personal loans, and buy now pay later schemes have all added to the problem. Many Australians are caught in a cycle of borrowing just to cover the basics: groceries, bills, fuel. It's become frighteningly common for households to rely on debt not for luxuries, but for survival. This level of personal debt has broader consequences. When people are choked by repayments, they spend less, which slows down business activity and weakens the economy. It also makes the nation incredibly vulnerable to financial shocks. One job loss, one medical emergency, or one interest rate hike can push families to the brink of default. Worse still, there's a deep psychological toll. Financial stress is contributing to rising anxiety, broken relationships, and even homelessness. Many Australians are waking up every day with a pit in their stomachs, wondering how they'll make it through the next month. Household debt isn't just a personal issue, it's a national economic risk, and unless it's addressed with long-term solutions, it could become the tipping point in Australia's economic stability. Number 3. Over-reliance on China. Australia's economic relationship with China has been one of the most profitable in modern history, but also one of the riskiest. For years, China has been Australia's largest trading partner, buying massive amounts of iron ore, coal, natural gas, and agricultural products. This trade boom brought enormous wealth, especially to mining regions and state budgets. But now, that heavy dependence is showing dangerous cracks. The problem is simple. When you put too many eggs in one basket, you're exposed when that basket starts to wobble. China's economy has recently hit major roadblocks: slowing growth, a property crisis, rising youth unemployment, and geopolitical tensions. As China consumes less, Australia feels the pinch. Export revenues drop, projects get delayed, jobs are put at risk, especially in industries directly tied to the Chinese market. Tensions between the two countries have also made things worse. Political disagreements over human rights, foreign interference, and COVID-19 led to trade restrictions on Australian goods like barley, wine, and seafood. These events expose just how vulnerable Australia is when a single trade partner holds so much economic power. And while some of those bans have eased, the message was clear: Australia needs to diversify, and fast. Despite the warning signs, progress has been slow. Building new trade relationships with countries like India, Vietnam, or the EU takes time, and those markets don't yet offer the same scale or demand. Meanwhile, China continues to explore alternative suppliers in Africa, South America, and Central Asia, potentially reducing its future reliance on Australia altogether. This over-reliance is no longer just a trade issue, it's a strategic vulnerability. When your biggest customer starts to stumble or shut the door, your entire economic foundation starts to shake. Australia's prosperity is too important to leave in the hands of a single foreign power. Number 2. Housing bubble and rental madness. Australia's housing market has long been a point of pride, but now it's becoming a national crisis. Property prices in cities like Sydney and Melbourne are among the most unaffordable in the world, with the average home price far outpacing average income. For many Australians, owning a home has gone from a dream to an impossibility. For years, the housing market surged thanks to low interest rates, tax incentives for investors, and limited housing supply. But that boom has created a dangerous bubble. Prices rose so high that first-home buyers were forced to take on enormous debt just to get a foothold, while investors snapped up properties, further driving up demand and reducing supply. Now, as interest rates rise and mortgage repayments climb, cracks are starting to appear. People who bought at the peak of the market are now struggling, with some at risk of negative equity, where their home is worth less than their loan, and those who rent aren't any better off. The rental crisis is equally alarming. Vacancy rates are at historic lows, and weekly rents have exploded in nearly every major city. It's not uncommon for tenants to face bidding wars, with dozens of applicants competing for a single property. Families are being forced out of cities, young people are moving back in with parents, and homelessness is on the rise, not because people aren't working, but because the cost of shelter has become unbearable. Meanwhile, supply isn't keeping up. Construction is slowing due to labour shortages, material costs, and planning bottlenecks, leaving demand far outstripping what's available. Government schemes aimed at affordability often end up fueling demand instead of increasing supply, pushing prices even higher. Australia's housing system, once a pathway to prosperity, has become a barrier. And unless deep structural reforms are made, this bubble may not just pop, it could burst the wide. Number 1. The cost of living crisis. Everyday life in Australia has become significantly harder, and for many, it's not just inconvenient, it's unbearable. The country is in the middle of a full-blown cost of living crisis, where the price of almost everything has gone up, but incomes haven't kept pace. From groceries and petrol to electricity and rent, Australians are paying more than ever before just to get by. The most basic necessities, milk, bread, vegetables, meat, have become noticeably more expensive. A trip to the supermarket that once cost $100 now pushes closer to $150, with some items rising by over 30% in just a couple of years. At the same time, power bills are hitting record highs, and filling up the car is starting to feel like a luxury. Even childcare and healthcare, essential services for working families, have become difficult to afford. This sharp rise in living costs has put enormous pressure on households, particularly those on fixed or low incomes. People are cutting back wherever they can, skipping meals, avoiding heating their homes, delaying doctor visits, not because they want to, but because they have to. What's worse is that these sacrifices often lead to long-term consequences on health, education, and well-being. The crisis is especially severe in urban areas, where high housing costs are eating up huge portions of people's pay. Renters are now spending 40 to 60% of their income just on housing, leaving little left for anything else. And while inflation is a global issue, Australia's unique combination of supply chain issues, corporate markups, and policy gaps have made the impact here particularly painful. This isn't just a temporary squeeze, it's a structural issue that's reshaping daily life. When people can no longer afford the basics, confidence erodes, spending slows, and the broader economy begins to weaken. The cost of living crisis isn't just hurting individuals, it's pulling at the fabric of society itself. Australia's economic troubles aren't the result of one single issue. They're the outcome of multiple pressures colliding all at once. A cost of living crisis that's squeezing families dry, a housing market out of control, dependence on global powers like China, a government struggling to keep up, and behind it all, a growing sense that the lucky country may be running out of luck. For years, Australia enjoyed a reputation as a stable, prosperous nation with high living standards and boundless opportunity. But now, many Australians are working harder just to stay afloat, while the wealth gap grows and basic needs become luxuries. It's no longer just about statistics or economic forecasts, it's about real people being forced to choose between heating their homes and putting food on the table. What makes this moment so critical is that these problems are deeply connected. High debt makes people vulnerable to interest rate rises, poor infrastructure strains, productivity, climate disasters drain government budgets, and when wages stagnate, people spend less, hurting businesses and slowing the economy even further. It's a complex web, and untangling it will take bold, coordinated action, not just political promises. But perhaps the most dangerous part, complacency. Thinking these issues will fix themselves or that they're just temporary could lead to a much deeper, longer-lasting crisis. The signs are there and they're flashing red, but by understanding what's really happening, by asking hard questions and demanding smarter solutions, we can start turning the tide. Because if we don't act now, Australia's economic meltdown won't just be worse than anyone predicted, it might be exactly what we allowed to happen.